All right, stand by. 10 seconds to go.
Ready, camera.
And cue talent.
One.
Roll to record.
This week's latest round of presidential primary voting was a big night for some and the last stop on the subway for others. Donald Trump was denied a sweep by John Kasich in Ohio, but he won everywhere else. And Bernie Sanders burned out, not winning a single contest. I'm John Phillips, and this is The Rundown. Trump won Florida with 45.7%. Marco Rubio, the sitting U.S. Senator from the Sunshine State, came in second with 27%. Ted Cruz got 17.1%, and Ohio Governor John Kasich got 6.8%. Florida was the last shot for Rubio, and he has now quit the race. Hillary Clinton crushed Bernie Sanders in Florida, 64.4% to 33.3%. In Illinois, Trump won with 38.8%. Cruz came in second with 30.3%, Kasich at 19.7%, and Rubio brought up the rear with 8.7%. Clinton won her former home state narrowly with 50.5% to Sanders' 48.7%. Moving on to Ohio, Kasich won his home state with 46.8%. Trump took second with 35.6%. Cruz had 13.1%, and Rubio a pathetic 2.9%. He, of course, told his voters to vote for Kasich in that state. Hillary beat Bernie 56.5% to 42.7%. In North Carolina, Trump won again with 40.2%. Cruz took 36.8%. Kasich with 12.7%, and Rubio had the very unlucky, in this case, 7.7%. Clinton again won over Sanders, 54.6% to 40.8%. And finally, there was the show me state, Missouri. In both parties, the margin of victory was razor thin, and there may very well be a recount, which could take months to complete. The preliminary results indicate that Trump won with 40.9% to Cruz's 40.7%. Kasich got 9.9%. Clinton barely edged Bernie 49.6% to 49.4%. To talk about what happened and what comes next, we're joined by our pal Scott Ott from his home studio in Dallas, Texas, political author and satirist, and here in Southern California, stand-up comic and PJTV contributor Stephen Cruiser. Cruiser, let's talk about Florida, because I thought Florida was probably the biggest story of the night, at least on the Republican side. You had a favorite son candidate still in the race. You actually had two when the campaign started, Jeb and Rubio. You had Rubio saying, look, if I make it in Florida, I'm in this race until Cleveland, and this is going to propel me to victories in the future. If I lose, I'm pretty much out. He ended up coming in second to Trump. Trump got 46% in this, which was a road game. Compare that to what Cruz did in his home state of Texas. That was 44%. Trump did better in Florida than Cruz did in his home state of Texas. How significant was Florida, in your opinion?
I think it was a very weird situation. It was pretty significant. His margin of victory over Rubio was huge. I do think Jeb Bush played a huge factor in that. I think had they not been splitting the Florida money and all of that all along, I think a lot of ill will was created over the course of the last few months between whomever in Florida supported Bush and whomever supported Rubio. So I think that just got ugly. That manifested itself in the margin of victory there. Trump's percentages right now, I've gotten used to. I think he's winning big. He's getting people to the polls. It's working. Whatever it is, it's still probably steamrolling to a brokered convention because he's doing better. He's doing better in the open primaries than the closed primaries. A lot of closed primaries left, but it was pretty significant just in the way. Okay, no, this is what I'm trying to say. I knew there was something I was getting to here. It was pretty significant because it had to have been obvious to the Rubio people well before the primary that they were going to get trounced. There is no way their internal polling was that bad. Yet Rubio still stayed in and denied Cruz probably North Carolina and in Missouri. So that just adds to the whole bitter, contentious dynamic of this thing because there's no way Rubio didn't know 2 weeks ago that he was going to get trounced by Trump there, and he should have gotten out then.
Scott, I want to piggyback on something that Cruiser said that I think is very important. He said that the battle between Rubio and Jeb early on for money, endorsements, space, airtime, everything is really what did him in the race, particularly in the state of Florida. After the results came in from the Sunshine State, I saw a really bitter fight going on Twitter between Mike Murphy, who ran the super PAC for Jeb, and Rick Wilson, who I think worked for a super PAC that favored Rubio. Those two were blaming each other for each other's demise. Do you think there's some truth to that, and how bitter are they?
You know, I think to a certain extent, Rubio was running on his own fumes. You know, he was kind of drinking the Kool-Aid of Rubio-ness, and his campaign seemed to think that somehow he was going to win without actually developing the kind of ground game that, for example, Ted Cruz has found is essential to doing well in some of these states. And I also think that all of Marco's talk, and I'm talking as a guy who actually voted for Rubio. I wrote a piece for PJ Media saying I voted for Rubio, but he should get out of the race before Florida. But I think all of his talk of saying, hey, the oldsters want us to wait in line, but we don't want to wait in line. Well, I think the oldsters are still there, and they're voting, and they want you to wait in line, Marco, and nobody likes a precocious little snot. And I think that's what Rubio came across as. I mean, when you got your own governor who's not with you, he didn't have any enthusiastic support from Jeb Bush in his home state there. But Cruzer's absolutely right, and he should have gotten out beforehand because he knew he was going to lose. It's frankly just hubris that he didn't get out.
John Kasich won his home state of Ohio. He was a favorite son. He has not moved on to Arizona and Utah, which are the two states voting next. Arizona, of course, winner take all. He's moved on to the neighboring state of Pennsylvania, which makes no sense to me because they don't vote until later on and deeper in the calendar. Do you think that he gets any momentum at all after winning his home state of Ohio?
He's still all but mathematically eliminated from this. There's just, he's talk about hubris. I mean, and I don't know how drunk the Republicans in Ohio are, but they gave us Kasich and John Boehner.
Mitt Romney campaigned for him.
Oh, and Mitt Romney campaigned for him. But he has, the Kasich PAC has upped its game with the ads attacking Ted Cruz in Utah, though, in the last 24, 36 hours. They have done that. But Kasich can talk about there's a new heavyweight and he's added the advisors and the whatever, but he's like, there's no way. There is no map for this to work out well for him for the rest of in the rest of this.
Here's how I see it, Scott. Maybe you agree with me, maybe you disagree with me. The rules for the RNC are that you are bound as a delegate to vote for the candidate who you supported if they are still actively involved in the campaign on the first ballot. From that point forward, you can move on to wherever it is that you want to go. If he stays, at least on paper, as an active candidate, those delegates are bound to him, and then whether it is true or not, he becomes more of a player at the convention if there is a brokered sort of situation going on. Do you think that's his strategy here, or do you think he's just kind of lacking a strategy and he just wants to stay in because he likes campaigning?
Well, that makes a lot of sense, John, frankly, because my theory was the reason he went to Pennsylvania next was because Greyhound was running a $17 one-way special, you know, from Ohio over to Pittsburgh or something. It makes his existence in this campaign no longer makes any sense but to muck things up for his party. Now, if it turns out that they go to the convention and nobody has secured the 1,237 necessary delegates on a first ballot. There's been a lot of chatter lately where people are saying, oh, if the GOP establishment tries to steal it from Donald Trump. Well, understand this. In football, you don't get any points for getting to the 5-yard line. You actually have to get it in the end zone. And so the same way, you don't get the nomination if you don't get the 1,237 delegates. And the whole purpose of the way things are set up were those delegates have a job. And if on the first ballot you should fail, you go to the second ballot. And that's when the real work begins, where people say, okay, we haven't come together, we don't have a majority. How do we cobble together a majority here? What candidate can bring enough of us together to go as a unified party into the November election?
Well, on the RNC rules, you're right. But there is a tradition in American politics of being able to win with a plurality. We've had presidents win with pluralities, including Bill Clinton in 1992. People win mayor's offices and governor's offices with pluralities all the time. So I think that there may certainly not be any sort of rules in the RNC that Trump could use to say, hey, that's not fair. But I think people who are just casual observers of politics or people that even watch it closely say, wait a minute, people win with pluralities all the time.
So he's threatening riots at the convention, but we're supposed to stand on protocol? No, I don't think. No. Here's the thing. Here's my thing with the Trump thing. He's the art of the deal guy. Get there and make a deal, okay? If he's that good at it, get there and make a deal.
Well, I mean, look, I personally, looking at the delegate math right now and looking at the map, he does have a shot to securing 50+1% of the delegates, particularly with all the winner-take-all states coming up.
I think the preponderance of closed primaries going forward would favor Cruz just enough to be spoiler at the moment. But I want to get back to the Kasich thing. I don't really think I think that you're right. He does want to have influence getting to the convention. But let's face it, the entire reason he's viable is because he has an Ohio zip code. That is his only reason for existence in this campaign. That's all he needs. The delegates, nothing else. He's still going to be a play. If he dropped out today, there's still going to be Kasich for VP, Kasich for VP. Everybody's going to be talking about that going into the convention. So he really doesn't need that, because if there's anybody realistic in his campaign, and I don't think there is, most of these guys this year are just like not looking at reality. I don't think Rubio looked at reality. He never had a campaign. There was never a strategy there. There was nothing there. And they just thought, we're going to be cool. You know, it's like, okay, what does that mean?
Right.
So Kasich just needs to be Kasich and still be the governor of Ohio to be a player in this.
Last question before we go.
Okay.
On the Democratic side, Bernie got blitzed. Hillary won every single contest. She won Missouri by a razor-thin margin, but she won. Is he done?
He's close to it, because I think what we're seeing manifest itself now is the fact that all of that enthusiasm doesn't necessarily translate into the money or skill or know-how to put together a ground game throughout the entire primary, and I think that's what's happening now.
Scott, is he done?
Yeah, and I'm surprised that we don't hear a lot more stories from the mainstream media about what a deeply divided Democratic Party we have. Because I'm trying to, I know some of these Bernie Sanders supporters. I love some of these Bernie Sanders supporters. They are not voting for Hillary Clinton. They will just not show up. And that's a lot of people, a lot of $27 contributions. And so this is crazy if Hillary Clinton doesn't find a way to bridge that gap. She is not lighting any fires under the 18 to 25 years old.
All right, Scott Ott gets the last word. That's all the time we have for today, but now it's your turn. If you are a Marco Rubio supporter like our own Scott Ott, who do you support now? Tell us what you think in the comment section below. I'm John Phillips. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.